Good evening. I'd like to call tonight's school board meeting to order. Please join us in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And we'll begin with Superintendent Moore's comments.
Good evening. It's almost time again for the annual Students Against Hunger food drive, benefiting the Food Bank of Central and Eastern North Carolina. Over the years, our students and staff have donated millions of meals for our neighbors in need. Last year alone, our schools donated more than 250,000 meals. Sanderson High School has been the overall champion for 17 years running, and last year donated an average of 106 meals per student. This year's this year's drive runs from October 1st through December 6th. While non-perishable food donations are certainly welcome, every school is also encouraged to set up an online fundraising page. Every dollar donated equals 5 meals. You can visit Food Bank Central Eastern North Carolina, CENC.org, SAH for Students Against Hunger to learn more and get your school registered. Schools are encouraged to promote the food drive via social media using hashtag Students Against Hunger and hashtag No One Goes Hungry. We hope to see a record number of donations this year, and I thank you all in advance for your generosity. Here's an exciting opportunity for our older students to see democracy in action and serve the community. The Wake County Board of Elections is seeking high school students age 17 or older to work the polls during upcoming elections. Student election assistants arrive at polling places on election days and facilitate the voting process. Student election assistants have similar responsibilities as precinct officials, undergoing a 3-hour training and then working at the polling place from 6 a.m. until 8:30 p.m. on election day. They will also be compensated the same as precinct officials, earning at least $165. Any students interested in working upcoming elections on October 8th and or November 5th will need to act fast to get registered and get trained in time. The Board of Elections is also now seeking student assistance for the March 3rd, 2020 primary. Our strategic plan compels us to prepare students for productive citizenship. It is a great way for our students to get a first-hand look at the process of exercising the most sacred of American rights. Visit WCPSS.net /student election assistant to learn more and register. Throughout the fall and into January, there are a plethora of opportunities for parents to learn more about our magnet year-round and early college schools. You can visit WCPSS.net /magnet events for a full list of in-person information sessions. We are also hosting a number of virtual sessions to provide information about all of our application schools and answer parent questions in real time. Visit the WCPSS Facebook page from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. this Thursday for the first of a series of Facebook Live presentations. Others will follow on October 17th, November 13th, December 12th, and January 16th. Each Facebook Live event will be broadcast from a different magnet school to give just an idea of the wide range of magnet theme offerings. Make sure you like and follow the WCPSS Facebook page to be able to view the live sessions. Love, data, and high expectations. That's how the News and Observer summarized the formula that helped Fox Road Magnet Elementary School quadruple its end-of-grade science scores, double its reading scores, and improve math scores by 65% over a 7-year period. It is a genuine success story for a school that struggled academically not long ago. As you'll see in this video the NNO published last week, high achievement starts with hugs and high fives.
You know you're lucky. You know you are. You've got family here, don't you? Yeah.
Teachers always gives us a hug or a high five or maybe a fist bump. I love it. I love the fist bumps and high fives and hugs. It's my favorite. We are at Fox Road Elementary School. Fox Road is really amazing because everybody here is nice and nobody's judging you. Yeah, usually people will help you if they need help with anything, or if someone needs help, then you can help them.
seen it's not just the academic performance that has improved. We're sending kids out of school more confident, ready for middle school, having access to opportunities in middle school that they would not have had if their performance had been, if we hadn't been growing performance of our students. So now there are opportunities. We've quadrupled our performance in science over that period of time. We've doubled our performance in reading. And math was one of our stronger areas, and one that we've increased about 65% in that area as well over that period of time. And attribute it to a phenomenal staff, kids who work really hard. We've instilled in our school an importance of learning that we communicate on a regular basis to our children, and also help give them the skill set to be successful in school. I have the most phenomenal staff. They're hardworking, they care deeply about the kids. We have a real focus on meeting individual needs in this school, and to me that's very important.
Okay, let me see.
But I'll tell you what, one of the things that we're doing, and I believe strongly in, is we put a lot of energy into student effort and also student ownership of their learning and that message.
Happy Wednesday. Good morning. Say hi, long time. Is that what it means? Good morning. Good morning. I got you.
Had a little trouble hearing that, but that concludes my comments. Thank you.
If you had trouble hearing it, do look it up and read the article. It's an outstanding article. We can't stress often enough that you're going to improve test scores by not worrying about test scores. Worry about kids, worrying about learning, and you're going to improve test scores. But if you focus on test scores, we'll just stop there. Yeah. But thank you to Bob Lewis and all of his staff. They're doing a great job at Fox Road. And thanks to the NNO for telling a very good story. We really appreciate that. Last week, Ms. Kushner and I were able to attend the District 3, there we are, North Carolina School Boards Association conference. So it's a regional conference for the state of North Carolina. Very good conference, great opportunity to interact with members of school boards across our region. And there I was pleased to receive on behalf of this board the Bell Award for school board training. We achieved the silver level. That is recognition of the professional learning that we do as a school board. So just kudos to my colleagues. Not everybody wins these awards. So we've got a high-level board, and the added professional learning is highly appropriate. The award is sitting at home on my dining room table that I meant to bring in. I apologize for not bringing it in to share today. This afternoon, I actually had a great opportunity to meet with the Wake Tech Board of Trustees. We appoint 4 members to the Wake Tech Board of Trustees, and they had the governor's education advisor. Jessica Holmes couldn't make it, but David Ellis, county manager, was there, and I was there. The governor's office, the county, and the Board of Education appoint the members to the Board of Trustees. Had a very strong conversation. There's a lot of things that we do in partnership with Wake Tech. That partnership is very strong. My message is that the best thing for Wake Tech is for Wake Tech to be really strong. If Wake Tech is really strong, if we're really strong, if the university system is really strong, then we can have conversation and learn and work together of what each other is doing. I often say in my field of chemistry, it's great to be interdisciplinary, but I need disciplines to be inter. And I think the same thing goes in terms of our education world. And anyhow, we had a very strong conversation. They're interested in having even some board-to-board discussions, so we may talk about that in the future. But it was really a good opportunity. I'll also note that my District 5 BAC meeting will be on October 2 at Westlake Middle School. It probably is going to be at 9:30, but it will be in the morning time. Look on the calendar because time is not completely settled yet. Mr. Sutton.
Just as already been stated, just hats off again to Bob Lewis and the staff and administration of Fox Road Elementary. Just a wonderful story, wonderful work going on over there. You like to think that you can just take that work and put it in a bottle and take it anywhere and improve any school. But if it were that easy, then hey, we wouldn't have any. We have all great schools everywhere, and so just a testament to the hard work that it takes to do this work every day, and that's performed by our teachers, administrators, support staff, and also, again, just hats off to a wonderful team over at Fox Road. We're proud of you.
Mr. Haggerty.
Thank you. A couple of things to share for the students in the district, some exciting opportunities. Some of the employers in District 7 are working on the Congressional App Challenge. I don't know how many people know about this. Yeah. Okay. So this is a wonderful opportunity for students involved in app development to come together, pitch an idea, learn from employers sort of how this process takes place. There's a workshop coming up this Saturday, September 21st in RTP, and I'll send information out about that via our social media channels. Students can work on this until November, submit it, and then they'll have to come together in their own Shark Tank style presentation, building their presentation and their sales skills, be able to speak in public and really explain what they've done and share that achievement. And they'll be honored, and it's a good chance, again, combining some of their own initiative and entrepreneurship with our CTE development that we teach and provide. Additionally, students K through 12 will have an opportunity, I don't know if anyone else is on this one, to name the new Mars rover. Did you hear about this? They are taking applications again for suggestions on what to name the new Mars rover. This is something that's sponsored by NASA, and the winners will not only get to name the rover, they'll get to go to Cape Canaveral and attend the actual space watch, or the space launch. And so hopefully, someone from Wake County Public Schools can come up with a really creative idea. The last one of these contests I saw was over in the United Kingdom, where the students named one of the Royal Navy research vessels Boaty McBoatface. And I just really, really, really hope we can do better than that. Finally, I do want to reach out. I know that I've had parents who've contacted me about concerns with the start of school, about some of the transportation issues we've been experiencing as a district. And, I want to acknowledge that we've had those difficulties, and I also want to acknowledge all the time and attention that's been put into trying to resolve these as quickly and as expediently as possible. I believe that all students have been routed. There are still maybe some kinks to work out with some of the routes, any issues of tardiness and some adjustments to routes. If there are still difficulties, please report them. Make sure that we know about them here at the central office with the staff, and that we'll continue to work really hard to get all these resolved as soon as possible for everyone. We know it's important, and we're working hard to get that resolved. Thank you.
Ms. Mahaffey.
I had the pleasure of going to see the new Apex High School as part of their homecoming tour. And they did a wonderful job of honoring their past, not only with bringing back the green, but having the art department made several murals that are on display in the cafeteria as they're moving into the future with collaborative spaces and just spaces that our students really are going to just excel in. And it was lovely to see. And so many people of the community came out and toured the facility. Students were on hand to give tours, and you could just tell there was a lot of excitement about being in their new space. And this afternoon, I was at Holly Springs High School. They had a formal visit from a senior patron and executive member of the London Mayors Association, Mr. Stephen Summers, who was there to present them with an award, an invitation, a formal invitation to attend the London International Choral Festival. This happens every year. This year it's December 28th to January 4th. I am so excited for the chorale members of
under the direction of Miss Jenny Patchett to go there and to experience this. This is a very prestigious invitation. You can only be invited, and you have to be recommended by someone who had previously attended this festival. They will be able to, they will have their own concert in a historic London building, and then a grand gala concert with chorales from all over the United States and the United Kingdom and some other countries. In addition to that, Mr. Peter Holder, who's the principal organist and assistant director of the chorale at Westminster Abbey, will be coming to Holly Springs to be a guest conductor for the chorale, as he will be the principal conductor for the Grand Gala. And just the excitement and hearing samples of these students' works. Our communications team was there, so I believe it's up on our Facebook page and Twitter now, and I highly recommend you go and see the hard work that these students have put into this. And I'm very excited to see when they come back in January how much they enjoyed the trip and how well they did. Thank you.
Ms. Johnson-Hostler.
Since I have a bit of a scratchy throat and cold, I will echo Mr. Haggerty. We mentioned two of the issues, and I'll just, there's one left, which I thought you were going to go to my last one too, which is another opportunity for our middle and high school students through C-SPAN to create short videos of what their vision is for 2020. And so a lot of great opportunities for our students to engage and learn. And quite frankly, what I would say that I couldn't do at this age is to actually have their voice shared in a much larger platform that they create for themselves. And so I will add this to the post for people to share with our students. And again, it's for both middle and high school students. Thanks.
Mr. Fletcher.
I'm going to pass tonight.
Ms. Kushner.
Good evening. And like Dr. Martin also pointed out, I really valued the North Carolina School Board Association. It was a good meeting with some very useful legal and legislative updates. So they're always eye-opening and they're always up to date. So thanks to the School Board Association. And also, one of the downsides of I was not able to go to the Parkside ribbon cutting, but the upside of that is I got my own tour with Teresa Caswell of Parkside Elementary yesterday. It is a beautiful school. Same prototype as Hortons Creek, and it is already beyond what our expectations were for enrollment, and the kids just have fallen into that school beautifully, and it's bright and lovely, and so I commend the facility staff for that excellent work, and thank Ms. Caswell for her time yesterday. And the Board of Advisory Council for District 6 will be meeting at noon on Thursday, October the 3rd. It will be at Millbrook Elementary, and we are going to have Assistant Superintendent Wade Martin come and talk about school choice. It's a public forum, so I hope everyone in District 6 will attend. Thanks.
Ms. Cash.
Last night we had our Board Advisory Council meeting, and it was for District 3 at Abbott's, at the Abbott's Creek. I couldn't think of it. But we did have that video play about Fox Road Elementary, and Bob Lewis just cracks me up because he was there, and he has to be the most humble guy I know. So I asked him to say a few words about this program he has at Fox Road Elementary, and he gives himself very little credit, but he certainly gives a lot of credit to his staff and how much they love the kids. So that was fun. I'm going to try to get to one of the Gauntlet of Love, where you run down every morning at 8:45. You run down the hall between these kids or between the teachers. Every kid gets to do that, and that's their morning every morning. I would love that. We did have the ribbon cutting at Northridge Elementary in North Raleigh, and it was a really good event. I invited the past board members to come, and they all came from 1981 on. And Henry Knight was there, Tom Oxome, Carol Parker, Kevin Hill, and me. And I invited Kevin Hill to speak because the majority of the work towards the funding of this program this school was under Kevin Hill, and I want to make sure he got full credit for that. But a lot of the neighborhood came out to tour the school. It's a real neighborhood school, so that was good too. That was it.
Ms. Scott.
I will try to be quick because I know we're excited to celebrate some amazing folks here. We also had our back meeting last night for District 1, and something that was really exciting is that out of all the 28 schools in District 1, every single one was represented. And it also looks like we are on board. We have 27 parent representatives for our schools, and I know the one school is really close, and that's really exciting to see that much involvement for the Board Advisory Council. It's a really important role. And I'm really proud of the principals and the community for coming together. This past weekend was the Knightdale Arts and Education Festival, and formerly known as K-Fest. And I was able to take my daughter to the beginning. One of the first music groups to play was the Knightdale High School Band. And they are a small group, but they have a mighty sound. But we were a little late, so we were running. I was dragging my daughter. We have to go. We're missing the band. But you could hear them, and they were amazing. They had some events in the morning. They had art set up from area schools, different types of setups and tables and tents and vendors and whatnot. Then in the evening was the music, and they also awarded scholarships. And something that I really loved, I had posted this on my personal Facebook page, and I'll share it here with all of you, is something that I really loved about this festival at Knightdale was that the vendors weren't just, the Scentsy or candles and things like that. They also had information about Medicaid. They also had information about food insecurity. They had affordable clothing for sale. They had free school supplies for the kids. The fun stuff to do there was free. The bouncy house was free. The bungee jump was free. And then in the evening, the music portion was also free. This was all free to the public. And the business community came together and provided scholarships for students, and we had several Knightdale High School students receive scholarships as well. And several advocacy groups, the business community came together to do this, and it was truly an amazing experience, because I thought, in a time where, if you follow any of the municipal elections, sometimes we have the not in my backyard. But what I loved about Knightdale was that they were saying this is our yard, and it's a community that is really embracing everyone and making sure everyone has a place and feels comfortable and loved. And we have some great schools in Knightdale too. So it was a great weekend. Thank you.
Thank you. I will entertain a motion to approve tonight's agenda.
Move to approve tonight's agenda.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. The agenda is approved. The first item on the agenda is a recognition item, Human Resources Employee Excellence, and I believe Jason Kennedy will be leading. Yes.
Good evening, Chairman Martin, members of the board, Superintendent Moore. It is my pleasure to bring you this evening the September recipients of the Wake County Public Schools Employee Excellence Awards. Awardees, when I call your name, please come to the front to receive your award from Mrs. Moore and remain up front until all recipients have come forward. Donna Agner, Lead Secretary, Zebulon Gifted and Talented Middle School. Ms. Agner can make you feel at home by giving you a hug. She makes copies, finds substitutes, manages celebrations, trains new clerical staff, and mentors other lead secretaries. Whatever the task, she can handle it. Ms. Agner never stands in the spotlight, and we honor her for her 30 years of dedication to Wake County Public School System. Sally Edwards, Pre-K Coordinating Teacher, Office of Early Learning, Title III. Sally was hired as the first WCPSS preschool special education teacher where a classroom opened at Northwoods Elementary School in 1991. She demonstrates professionalism, integrity, and perseverance at all times. Sally has a sweet disposition, treats everyone with respect, and often demonstrates random acts of kindness. Karen Poindexter, IRT, AIG Coordinator. Karen has been so instrumental in the success of Moore Square. From the small details to the biggest tasks like SIP, magnet certification, PLT planning, Karen gives 110%. Karen does not just talk the talk, but walks the walk every day. She is truly a blessing to Moore Square, and our successes would not be possible without her. Timothy Walker, Career Development Coordinator, South Garner High School. Mr. Walker is truly an asset. He collaborates with school counselors to ensure that students have access to resources that will connect them to tangible outcomes beyond high school. He has built strong partnerships with agencies throughout the SGHS Business Alliance. Mr. Walker provides each student with a career assessment and then uses that information to help them find their path. Jen Patara, Senior Administrator, Human Resources. Ms. Patara goes above and beyond to assist our administration with staffing. She is always available, responds to concerns quickly and outside of school hours. She is thorough in her work to help us ensure that we are recommending the best candidates. We are ever so grateful for the support she provides, and we truly believe she deserves this recognition. Ricardo Peralta, Custodian, Lake Myra Elementary School. Ricardo goes above and beyond his daily duties for teachers at Lake Myra. He is passionate about his job, the environment, and helping others. He has even jump-started a dead car battery for a teacher. Mostly, he is kind and friendly and always willing to help with whatever issue you may have. He always has a smile on his face. Stephanie Pazalakis, 6th grade ELA teacher, Carroll Middle School. Ms. Pazalakis is entering her 9th year teaching and 2nd at Carroll Middle. Ms. Pazalakis came to a new school and level of education and immediately embraced softball coaching, Positivity Project, 7 Habits of Technology to embrace our school's magnet theme, Discovery, all while significantly closing literacy gaps in the students she serves. Gloria Anderson, CNS Cashier, Carpenter Elementary. Miss Gloria has been a ray of sunshine in the Carpenter Cafe. Morning glory flowers are beautiful, bright, and unravel into full bloom in early mornings. Likewise, Gloria is at her best early in the morning, serving a hot meal with a warm smile. She always looks our chameleons in the eye, calls them by name, and makes them feel special. She always seems to know who needs an extra helping of TLC on the side and a dash of love to get them through. Michelle Tucker, Director, K-12 Math. Michelle is an outstanding employee with a keen ability to vision and prioritize work. She handles all situations with the utmost professionalism and willingness to remove barriers. She has worked with the high school to create an app of the math standards for administrators to use when visiting classrooms. In addition, she taught herself how to create a website, and now we have a K-12 math website on all school websites. She is an asset to WCPSS. Walter Richardson, Head Custodian, Banks Road Elementary. Mr. Richardson is a rock star. Kids love him, teachers love him, parents love him. Not only does he keep the building clean, but his friendly smile brightens the entire place. Mr. Richardson is a talented musician, and he shares his piano and saxophone talent with the school and the community. Hold on, wait for it. Even playing at a teacher's wedding and church functions. When we say he rocks, we really mean it. Melanie Rhodes, Senior Director, K-12 Instructional Support, Title I. Melanie Rhodes has served Wake County Public School System students, families, and educators for more than 32 years. Melanie is and has been an invaluable asset to the Wake County Public School System and our greater community, and she will truly be missed when she retires from the district on September the 30th. We wish her all the best for a long and happy retirement. Miss Eloise Hilliard, Grad Point teacher. I see Ms. Hilliard has her fan club here tonight. Ms. Hilliard is often one of the first staff members to arrive each day at our school at 7 a.m. Always with a smile on her face, our staff members and students absolutely love her. She is the epitome of a professional with a positive attitude. At the age of 89, she commutes. She commutes daily to our school from Clayton. She is, in fact, and we looked this up, the oldest teacher in Wake County Public School System, and yet she daily displays an abundance of energy and positivity. Since we have already given a hearty round of applause, please turn and face the board to be greeted by Chairman Martin.
Well, thank you all. An impressive group. 89 years. We're impressed. We're grateful. Thank you for all you do. You've touched many lives. All of you have touched many lives, and your board is extremely grateful for the work that you do. You know, 89 years with one person, not all in the school system, although I bet quite a number. We have a couple hundred years worth of service among you all. That's impressive. Thank you. And in that service, what I heard and sort of repeated over and over again was three themes. You build relationships, you create opportunities, and you do stuff. And that's what education is about. We build relationships. Our job is to be opportunity creators. We don't know what our students will end up doing, but we give that foundation so that they have the opportunity, they're exposed to opportunities, and we create the opportunity for who knows what the students are going to do. And then we just have to pick up the pieces and make sure it happens. That's what we do in education. And from all of us, thank you. Your service is, I wish we could compensate you better. I wish we had better, you need more than a plaque, but know that we're your advocates and doing the best we can to try to create a strong system to recognize your work so you can do it better. Thank you so much from all of us. So we'll next move into public comment, but we'll take a minute or two. You're more than welcome to stay. But I kind of have a notion that you've been working a lot today, so a few minutes, we'll take a pause for a couple of minutes.
And then I have the little seal on the back. See if we can get one of just her. Congratulations. You want to get her to that back? Maybe, yeah. Travel left. That's awesome. Thank you. I know you got a long drive. See you later. Take care. All right.
do for breakfast most of the time?
I used to either go to the campus thing, they have like omelets, like ham, eggs, and cheese, just minutes. Or I go to Burger King to like the French toast sticks.
Is the Burger King close by? Is the Burger King close by?
Yeah, so like 9 minutes off campus. I love the drive to cross the highway.
Yeah, I'm right over there.
I'm in my 26th year, still going. I'm in it 16. Yeah, oh, did you really? Yeah, very good. Very good. But thank you. Thanks for coming out. Great celebration.
I'm assuming she's retired.
No.
They didn't say she was.
No.
They didn't say she was.
The granddaughter said they keep asking her every year if she's going to retire.
Right.
Nope, that's what she does. So no, she's not retired.
Wow. You know what? And I hate to say it, but you know.
I heard the same thing.
You know.
I mean, that happened to a custodian that I knew that was a wonderful man. He was 8 years old and he came every day, going up at 5 a.m. And he didn't want to retire. And he retired in 6 months later.
If she wants to keep working, I would let her keep right on working and driving everywhere else she does. Because it's what gives them, life.
It's a reason.
Yeah.
I'll take that over people who just sit and wait.
I'll tell you.
Yeah. Okay, all right. He's not giving
can't think of an example right now, but we're always very conscious about
Dress code and honor code, for example.
Oh, yeah.
Dress code and honor code.
Very nice to meet you. Okay, great contact.
All right, if we can go ahead and reconvene. All right, the next item on the agenda is our public comment period. Citizens who sign up to address the board during public comment will be called upon in priority order, first for items on the agenda and then for items not on the agenda. Each individual speaker will be allowed 3 minutes for remarks. Specific personnel or student matters are not appropriate for this public comment setting, but may be addressed through applicable WCSS personnel, the grievance policy, or other applicable policies. Our first speaker is Mr. Blaine Dillard. I apologize.
All right, 89 years. Well, I could have done a speech about that. That would be a lot better than what you're going to hear. But that's impressive. Thank you. It's good to be back. Tonight I'm here to talk about a core value that I believe any organization should hold, and that is data transparency. For those of you who are teachers, this is a no-brainer. You wouldn't accept a research paper from a student containing charts of numbers without cited sources, would you? For those of you who work in business, this is a no-brainer. You wouldn't accept a sales proposal from a vendor citing their product success data if the data wasn't backed up with verifiable sources, would you? Likewise, as a parent and a taxpayer, I have a hard time accepting charts which don't cite sources and lack explanations for variances, anomalies, and context, and so should you. As you may know, this parent here and many others do check the data put out by WCPSS and your vendors. The reason I'm bringing this up now is because later we'll be seeing a chart, number 10 specifically, as of a couple of minutes ago, on which I was able to calculate and confirm 16 out of 17 numbers based on the publicly available record pulled straight from DPI. The one mismatch was the one data point I was most interested in, which is Math 1 proficiency. The WCPSS chart says we're 8% ahead of the state. DPI says we're 7% behind the state. That's a huge 15% difference that deserves a very plausible explanation, which I'm hoping to hear later. That chart lacks both a source citation and, most importantly, does not explain why this one data point contradicts the public record available at DPI. With that said, I'm calling on this board to consider the following proposal. Any chart that WCPSS makes publicly available should cite the website to the publicly available data used to make the chart. This citation should be on each chart because individual charts can be used in standalone cases. An example of this would be a link to the DPI data used for the chart. And number two, this is very important. If the data on the chart in any way varies from what is reasonably found in the public record, then an explanation must be provided on the chart along with any notes about any special calculations used. If any of you have read my blog articles earlier this year, and I hope you all have, I believe you will find that those are the best practices that I personally have tried to use when sharing or writing about data. I make an effort to always cite my sources with links and provide explanations when needed because the last thing I want is to be quoted out of context. I expect nothing less from WCPSS, and I hope you will agree. Thank you.
Pete Bly.
He is broke down.
All right, Carrie Bly is next.
He would have liked to have been here. In the beginning of this process, I feel like I approached this board and this math problem and this whole school district with respect that you deserved. Today I'm angry, and I'm angrier than I've ever been. I am having to start the process of reinstating my high-functioning autistic daughter's IEP to protect her from her own school system. I am having to do that to get pieces of paper that show her how to do math problems.
That's insane. And I'm ashamed, and I'm angry. I'm angry that an 11-year-old can survive autism, can be diagnosed one day that she might never speak again, make it through unimaginable hardships to sit in a typical classroom and dream of a future, friends, and college, to come out the other side and have it sabotaged because she will never be able to navigate these incomplete math classes. You should be angry. None of this is necessary. I have been to NCDPI. I have tried to fight for Wake County. They throw this problem 100% back to you. They tell me that you alone are responsible for these curriculum choices, and it is your burden and your problem. When I do hear the quote that you don't think people understand there's no curriculum to go back to, I can see there's truth in that. Now, what I want you to do is take accountability for that position that Wake County is in. Take accountability for painting ourselves into a math corner where we are unable to have curriculum options. Some of you have been here forever. You understand exactly what's going on. Now, I'm yelling at you. I need you to go do your job and fight for math standards that allow you to seek out other curriculums, any other curriculums. And I want you to spend the money to get these pieces of paper into the hands of every student, not just my daughter, my son as well. I'm mad and I care, and I want you to get mad and I want you to care. I want you to be innovative and look at the problem. It's not my fault or my child's fault that Wake County may have gotten tricked into supporting somebody else's curriculum business model. We should have been cautious and demanded more information. We should have laid eyes on these products, and we should have anticipated the hard questions from parents, and we should have anticipated needs from students who don't have access to computers yet. That would be protecting the best interest. MVP and Open Up resources were not well tested, they were well funded, and that is a very big distinction. I can't do it. Your timer. Thank you.
Kimberly Miller.
In a couple weeks. That has been the answer that we've received from the district facilities office every 2 weeks for the past 3 months about the air conditioning in our gym at East Wake High School. But sadly, the story goes back much further. We have been without working air conditioning in our gym since last fall. That means our 2018 homecoming dance was held in the cafeteria. All of basketball season was played in sweltering temps. Our class of 2019 seniors had to limit their family members allowed at the award celebration because it had to be moved to the auditorium. Then we were told it'll be done as soon as school is out. Then, wait, nope, we're out of money. July 1st. We'll get it done July 1st. And then we move back to in a couple weeks. That means the volleyball mom who used her only day off to be there for her daughter's first volleyball game found out an hour beforehand it was canceled. That means our volleyball seniors, they don't know if they're going to get to play another home game, even though conference play began tonight. It was supposed to be a home game, now it's away. This means the practice sessions for volleyball and basketball have been minimized. With that, their ability to develop and grow as athletes, and possibly their opportunity to continue to play past high school, or even worse, not be considered for a scholarship. And I'm asking you, why has all of this happened? Why isn't our school being taken care of? Why is the district holding a press conference about changing the name of East Wake Middle School and spending money on signage when we don't have a safe environment for our students and our athletes? We would like to think the district would want to protect their $100,000 investment they made in our gym just a few years ago. But instead, they have let the sweltering heat and humidity greatly shorten the lifespan of the floors, the ceiling, and the wall covering. Are we going to have to wait a full year for those to be replaced once they create a safety hazard? If this was Heritage or Millbrook, would it have taken a full year? Why is it happening at East Wake? We know we're a Title I school. We know we don't have the parents with an income that can support it like these other schools. And I'm proud my son attends a diverse school, but I never imagined the lack of equality within the district. Please know I'm not talking about it just being a little warm. Our gym constantly exceeds 80 degrees and often exceeds 90. As a point of reference, the American College of Sports Medicine states a safe gym playing environment is 68 to 72. And we're not even just talking about our players. What about our coaches and PE teachers? According to OSHA, the workplace temp must be between 68 and 76 degrees. So we violate that every single day they're there. We don't know where to go. This was our last resort. We've left countless messages to the offices, haven't gotten a response. Our superintendent, Dr. Savage, is aware. We haven't gotten anywhere. Our principal has got a couple weeks. Ms. Scott has got a couple weeks. We're asking for it not to be a couple weeks. Thank you.
Stephanie Lorman. Ms. Lorman. Karen Goki Austin. Sorry.
Good. I thought they all came for me, but apparently not. So I attended a conference last weekend on special education laws, and I networked with a lot of parents there that were also interested in learning about FAPE. I met some parents with children with rare genetic diseases and severe complex medical issues. And they were advocating for catheter changes and feeding tube insertions for their children during the school day. Y'all, I just want structured literacy. I want science-based instruction. I want more phonics to help these kids. That shouldn't be something I have to ask for. That should be a given, that's the standard of education. On the drive over to the conference, I had a nice call with the school principal. He's new to our school, and he's a very nice man, and he is incredibly receptive to responding back to me with any questions that I have. I did ask him what his experience with dyslexia was, and he let me know that he had a student once with that diagnosis. 1 in 5 students are dyslexic, 1 in 5. I educated him on that, and then I told him that in my daughter's class alone, there should be 5 of them. Once again, I'm having to educate the staff. We also discussed the program a child's receiving in her pull-out services. He'd never heard of that program. I had. I Googled it the moment the SPED teacher sent it to me, and I was nauseous for 3 days afterwards. It is not an appropriate intervention. It's not appropriate for struggling readers, and they've used it on her for almost 2 years now. He was surprised when I mentioned that was the program they were using because he verified it should be Recipe for Reading that they're using. He notified me the very next day then that they had switched her and they're now using Recipe for Reading. I should be happy about that, except for it's really only effective for K through 3rd grade, and my 5th grader, once again, has a curriculum that's been chosen for her that's inappropriate. No wonder her grades are continuing to decline. It would be awesome if it were easy for parents like me to find out what the truth is and what they're supposed to be using, and also have confidence in the schools that they're doing what they're supposed to and educating our students correctly. I remind my kids every day of how lucky they are to have me as their mom. They don't have a clue about the effort that I put in to advocate for them, to make sure they get the education they deserve. Seriously? The federal IDEA law states that when determining special education eligibility, a child's academic achievement should be compared to state standards. July 1st, 2020, with the new SLD policy going into place, it's going to be compared against cultural peer groups. That means that a black dyslexic child has a different standard than a white dyslexic child. If only dyslexia could understand race, but it can't. I hate that. All right, y'all get more homework.
Hava Edelson.
Hi, my name is Hava Edelstein. I am not a parent or a teacher, just a concerned citizen who has a strong background in the study of cognitive science. That is how students learn. Before I start, I want to second Blaine's point that the Math 1 data point for all 9th graders in the upcoming presentation for Math 1 does not match the DPI public record, and I also want to know why. The title of my speech today is To Count Every Student Because Every Student Counts. It is in regards to MVP. The reason for my speech is that some parents filed public record requests and shared them, and we got to see some internal email correspondence. It counted students having difficulty struggles, and I don't mean productive struggles, I mean struggles where learning the material at a basic level is difficult or impossible without a private tutor. MVP works for some students, but not all. It's important to accurately gauge the extent of the issue, because how can a problem be addressed if it's not fully understood? A couple of the emails were a little misleading to me. One email said that Mr. Dillard was an isolated case. We know that's not the case. Another email said that only 15 or 16 parents had filed complaints. I mean formal complaints out of 30,000 students or something like that. To me, the number of formal complaints is a really disrespectful way to count the students having issues with unproductive struggle. It doesn't count so many categories of students. It doesn't count the students who have talked to their teachers privately. It doesn't count the many, many parents who have talked to teachers and maybe the principals or vice principals. It doesn't count parents who choose to talk issues out at the local level instead of writing to the correct person at the central level. All of these parents who have just talked to the school instead of the central level, it does not count those. It does not count children who have parents that cannot or will not advocate for them. These are some of our most vulnerable students, students who have adverse events in their family like poverty. That means parents taking time off work is not an option, or parents with mental illness or substance abuse issues. Sometimes there are cultural or language barriers that prevent students from getting involved. Just because a parent isn't involved does not mean a student is doing fine. It's important to advocate for all students, to consider especially the needs of our most vulnerable and needy students. One way to count vulnerable students is to make sure their stories are told in official presentation, like today. But sadly, in the presentation I saw, they are not counted. You see, let me tell you something you won't see in the presentation that I saw for tonight, at least a few minutes ago, which is the progress or lack of progress of economically disadvantaged students taking the Math 1 end-of-course exams. A few years ago, Wake County EDS students slightly outperformed the state. Under MVP, they are doing worse. In 2019, 31.8% of the state's ninth grade students were at grade level, while only 22.8% of Wake County. I think we're the second wealthiest county in the state and performing well below the state average for poor students. One way to let students know they matter is to make sure that they count, is to make sure that their parents know they count, is to show their data, even if it's inconvenient or not positive. The first step to fixing an issue, at least, is to acknowledge that it exists. Thank you.
Michelle Morrow.
Hi, thanks for the opportunity to speak. I am a mom here in Cary of 5 students, and I just wanted to talk about the curriculum issues that are going on between elementary school all the way. I do have kids also in the Wake Tech program. As a nurse as well, I am very concerned at how much time that was taken out of the curriculum in the beginning of the school year to take surveys talking about people's racial profiling, their sexual identities, any sexual struggles that they might have. That's completely inappropriate in a school setting. Absolutely. The school board has no right, the schools, the teachers have no right to be asking students of those questions. And as far as I'm concerned, we're taking something that we're trying to promote, which is tolerance and a lack of racism and acceptance and equality, and we're putting people into more and more boxes every day, and it's making them more isolated and it's making them more insecure. The reality is I sat in this room and it was blissful to watch people of every race and gender. They all agreed with one another, and they were encouraging one another, and they were speaking of the great things that they've done. And what was it? It was loving one another. And I tell you, if you look at any preschool playground, you don't have to teach kids to be kind to people. They already know. They are drawn to the people who want to play with them. They're drawn to the people who are nice to them. And if our children would just watch their teachers interacting with one another and loving one another and supporting one another, we don't need to teach them about loving people that look different than them. We don't need to do that. What we need to do is we need to focus on reading, writing, and math. And as far as I'm concerned, in elementary school, we need to take all of the computers out. You saw how Fox Hill Elementary was so successful? I don't know if you noticed, but there was a lot of paper and pencils going on in that school. And that is what we need. We need to teach our kids what they were created to be. I firmly believe every one of us was created in God's image, and we were created with gifts and talents and strengths and abilities. And what our job is as educators is we need to find what their role is going to be in community. community. We don't go to school just to make our lives better. We go to school because there's something that we were made to do, and we're going to make our community better when we do it to the best of our ability. And it's time for us to stop pigeonholing people in and trying to make them be social justice warriors. What we need is kids who know how to succeed. They also need to know how to fail. They need to have consequences when they don't do their work. They need to be disciplined, and they need to be in their seats. And the teachers need the respect that they deserve. And I guarantee you that no teacher came in there to be a political activist. They did not become a teacher in order to create kids that are expecting to get free stuff. They went into teaching because they loved and had passion for something that they loved as a kid, whatever it is. So let's give them the money that they need to be great in the classroom, and let's stop using this money to keep pushing an agenda of the LGBT agenda and all this. I guarantee nobody knew what their teacher's life was like when you were growing up and what they did behind closed doors. And I tell you what, I don't tell my kids about my relations with my husband, and I don't want them hearing about anybody else's in the classroom. It's completely inappropriate. So thank you for the great work that you do.
Calla Wright.
Good evening. I'm Calla Wright, co-founder of Concerned Citizens for African American Children. And as you know, I'm an advocate for the underrepresented children, the black and brown children. And I just want to comment regarding the recent test score release last week. And I wanted to talk about the two schools, Buggen, Barwell Road, who received Fs, but my great concern is about the children growth percentage, and that is of great concern. We need to examine what the reasons are for the low-performing schools' grades or the decline in growth. Is it leadership? Do we need to make some adjustments? And as the children continue to grow, it shows that their levels of reading or their inefficiency or inabilities to read is of great concerns. We have celebrated the success of Fox Road, but we still have many segregated, high poverty, low-performing schools. I've attended many of the Achievement Committee meetings, and I've not heard the staff say or address the plan on closing the achievement gap issue. And we have other schools that are of concern, Mount Vernon, River Oaks, and the other redirectional schools. And as our elected officials, we cannot accept failure. Complacency is not acceptable, and it's imperative that we all work to make sure our children, all children, regardless of race, regardless of background, that they are proficient and can perform in our society. We must either examine our leadership in schools or teachers, or if they cannot or not efficient in working with children who are of low poverty background, then we need to get people in there who are indeed proficient experts in working with children on all levels, but particularly those who are in the high poverty, low performing schools. Now, we just celebrated Fox Road. Now, they should be the model that we adapt and use this model to challenge other schools to come up and exceed the expectations like Fox Road. Thank you for your attention. I'll be there looking at the meetings. Thank you.
Kristen Beller.
Good evening, Superintendent Moore and board members. As you know, Waken CAE does very important work to improve the working conditions of educators and the learning conditions of our students. Because we see this as a foundational purpose, Waken CAE leadership and members feel compelled to share with you all a little bit about the work we're doing this year. We're spending time this fall in conversation with educators around the district, asking three very specific questions. One, what do our students need and deserve? If we were able to give our kids what they need to be creative and knowledgeable learners who are empathetic and resilient enough to navigate challenges successfully, what would that require? Two, what do educators need and deserve? If we were able to give ourselves resources that would nurture educator growth, development, and effectiveness, what would that require? And three, what do our communities need and deserve? If If we want strong communities able to support the public schools within them, what would that look like? What services would need to exist? Who would we need to be engaging with our students, educators, and schools that isn't already? These are questions that we believe will help us understand more clearly what we all mean when we say we support public schools. But we know that even when asking these questions, we're making some assumptions. We assume that our community values students growing up as creative and knowledgeable learners. We assume that our community values our students being empathetic so that they are able to understand and care about someone whose life experience differs from their own. We assume our community wants our students to be resilient so that challenging situations don't debilitate them, so that they learn how to grow through mistakes, and so that they develop an understanding of appropriate levels of thought, consideration, and care given to various situations. We recognize the research that demonstrates how the level of support children receive during adverse experiences has a direct impact on their long-term health, and we assume our community cares about the health of our children. We make these assumptions under a much larger one, that we want the children in our community to be more equipped to lead us all in a better version of our world than the one that exists today. We make that assumption as generations before us taught us that our responsibility as adults is to help those who follow us do better than we were able to do. Wake MCA members know that we're in this together, and as educators, we also know that none of us gets what we need or deserve by acting alone. In order to work together, whether it's in a classroom, a boardroom, on a factory floor, or around an operating table, we have to understand the ways that our lives are connected to each other. It's critical that we understand what common values and experiences tie us together as humans, and once we understand that, we can also understand that even if something doesn't appear to directly impact your life, if it impacts someone else's, then it has value. We feel compelled tonight to bring our collective attention to the vision for public schools we're demonstrating and communicating to the children in our community, be it at home, at school, or within other organizations. We ask that our school district make it clear. I'm going to let Cecilia finish our statement.
Cecilia Joyce.
Hi, thanks. We ask that our school district make it clear that people of all different life experiences, whether they are students, staff, or parent, know that in our buildings and on our campuses, they can count on safe spaces and nurturing, caring adults who demonstrate empathy, eliminate barriers to full participation in learning, and build skills to ensure that this generation of youth will indeed do better than we have been able to. We applaud the daily work that many staff members do across the district to help our schools live up to this expectation, but we also know that in schools where those practices are not yet consistent, for whatever reason, it is the work of special ed services, AIG educators, the Office of Equity Affairs, and other educators that help us to refocus on students. So tonight, we also express deep gratitude for the intentional way those staff members work to improve learning conditions for all of our students across the district, and for the way they create space to honor all our families and how they contribute to our broad and diverse community. And now I would like to use my remaining time for a few personal comments on this topic. I've been teaching for 22 years in the classroom, 2nd through 6th grade, and as an AIG teacher in Granville and Wake County at magnet and non-magnet schools. I value building relationships with all my students, all the students in the school, and have been very proud of the work that this county has begun to do around equity and nurturing social and emotional needs of all kids. Here are a few examples to illuminate my stance on relationship building and the strong emotional needs of our students. I have counseled and hugged a 1st grader as she sobbed on the last day of school because she will miss the love and structure of our staff and school during the summer. I have listened to a 3rd grade homeless girl thank me for extra math problem-solving homework because she said it made her think of our enrichment time together while she's at temporary hotel housing. And I have talked to a gay student whose parents are in denial about his sexual identity, who have forbid him from going to that safe after-school activity that he considered his safe space. I say all this because I want you to trust us as professionals to love, care for, counsel, and teach our kids, even about tough topics such as social justice. We, despite popular belief, are not superheroes. We won't always do or say the perfect thing, but please support us in having these courageous and crucial conversations with our students. Thank you.
Sean Pollins.
Hey, this topic is really personal for me. As a student in Wake County growing up, I was bullied almost every day from 6th grade until I left Wake County. And I left Wake County. I went to Washington, D.C. to get away from this. It's not a school problem. It's a community problem, and it happens everywhere in the world. I just came here today to thank the board and staff for its swift action in letting the school system know that certain privacy issues are important for students to maintain within themselves until they're ready to discuss them. I'm being torn up inside right now because I want to tell you so much more, but I'm concerned. Some of the people who are in the room feel very strongly in different directions on this subject, and I feel like when I spoke out about this, it took me back 20 years to an incident that happened in a classroom with a teacher, and I've been counseled not to talk about it, but you can see I want to, because it's important that every viewpoint is represented at the table, and I know that the worksheet didn't come from anywhere in particular, so I don't know if there's a deficiency of voices in the room when these decisions are being made and when these curriculums or these exercises for teachers that will, make their way down into the classroom when they're created. I don't know if there's enough voices in the room, but I just wanted to thank you for considering people's experiences, and I want you all to know that I do support the work that the Office of Equity Affairs is doing. I think you can tell in my voice how important I think it is. So I just wanted to commend you all for your efforts, and just know looking forward, you have an ally in me. And if you need connections to my community, I know a lot of people who do this stuff professionally, and I'm sure they would be of assistance to you if you guys need it. Thank you.
That concludes our public comment. We have a number of consent items. Do I hear a motion to approve the consent agenda? I'm sorry. Thank you. I jumped the gun. We have one information item, yes. Chief of Staff, from the Office of Chief of Staff, we had the 2018-19 testing and accountability results. Dr. Edward McFarland and Brad McMillan will have the presentation.
Good afternoon, Chair Martin, or good evening, Chair Martin, Superintendent Moore, and members of the board. So we are here tonight to provide as an information item a broad summary of the Wake County Public School System student performance data on various state testing and accountability metrics for the 2018-19 school year, such as proficiency rates, growth rates, high school specific data, and then we're going to close with a general summary. This evening's presentation will be high-level overview. However, our teams will bring a much more detailed and granular data results presentation to the Student Achievement Committee in November. Also tonight, along with providing a general overview of last year's results, we want to provide you with information and with context that will help you understand the changes to the testing and accountability landscape for this past year. There are certainly celebrations, and there are also areas with lots of deep work for us to still do as a district. So if you have broad questions at the end, we will certainly be happy to take them. Really specific questions, or if you have feedback for us, we'll be happy to take that so that we may incorporate it into the presentation for November. Or if you want to email us something afterwards, we'll be happy to make sure that gets into the November presentation. But without any further introduction, I want to introduce Assistant Superintendent from Data Research and Accountability, Dr. Brad McMillan. Thank you.
Good evening, Chair Martin, Superintendent Moore, members of the board. As Dr. McFarland sort of queued up for me here, we're going to talk about just a general overview of what our results were that were publicized by the state a couple of weeks ago, but also give you a little bit of context for understanding that because there were some changes to the testing and accountability program last year, as there are almost every year, that sort of always require a little bit of explanation and nuance. And so I'll start with those, and then we'll get into what some of the results were that were released a couple of weeks ago. So as you're all aware, a couple of years ago, the state changed the curriculum standards in mathematics and the state standard course of study. And anytime the curriculum standards change, the tests have to change because we start assessing different skills at different points in the curriculum, and something that used to be a 5th grade topic becomes a 4th grade topic. And so the tests have to change concurrently with that. So in grades 3 through 8 for math and also Math 1, we had new tests last year based on those new standards. And we also had a completely new test in Math 3 that didn't exist before. We didn't have an end-of-course test for that for that subject until last year. So positives and negatives that go along with that. First of all, we got the data back very late. We didn't get scores back on any of these new assessments until about the middle of August. And that was a bit complicated because families were expecting to see, how did my son or daughter do? It's been 2 months. Why does this take so long? We also have a state law around how we place kids into accelerated math programs that is predicated on some of this information. And so particularly for our year-round schools who are already in session, they had to kind of really quickly reevaluate the placement for some students to make sure that they were in compliance with the law. Next year it'll be out on time, but in the first year there's always a delay like that. Unfortunately, this year we're going to have the same problem with reading at the end of this year because we're getting all new reading assessments this year. So we'll see this movie again next year only for reading. In general, these new assessments had kind of a mixed impact on proficiency rates at the end of grade level and end of course. A little bit, some positive, some negative, and that's a little bit of a bird walk from our normal experience with new tests, at least over the last 15 to 20 years. And it does complicate our reporting of trend information to some degree because when you see changes in scores from one year to the next, you can't rule out the fact that that change, be it a movement up or movement down, is not due to the fact that it's a different test. And so we always have to kind of have that caveat in mind. On the flip side, however, the growth results that the state provides us are sort of immune from all of these test changes. They are not dependent upon new standards or higher or lower cut scores. They can take an old test and a new test and still calculate growth. So in the next couple of weeks, when we get all that information out for all the different subjects and grade levels, that will give our schools a nice apples-to-apples comparison to help smooth some of that out and help them make better sense of the math results that they got for this year. So just to kind of give if you'll allow me to do a little historical digression here for a minute, over the last 20 years, our tests have changed on a fairly regular basis, and most of those changes have been to raise standards, driven by NCLB and other things. This particular chart right here is taken from a study that was done that shows the reading demands of the end of grade tests that kids were taking in the late 1990s in North Carolina compared to more recent iterations of those tests. And there's a lot of spaghetti and dots on this chart, but I've got a couple of arrows here where I'm referencing a couple specific data points. And on the y-axis there, you'll see the Lexile measure that is a commonly used reading difficulty metric that's in our field. And if you look over on the left there, you'll see that the Lexile level, or the reading demands of the 4th grade test that is currently being in use in North Carolina, has the same Lexile level as the 7th grade test that kids were taking back in the early 1990s. So by extension, the reading demands of what it was to do well in 7th grade 20 years ago are now what it takes to do well in 4th grade on that assessment. So it just gives you an idea of how much things have changed and how much things have moved over time. This particular chart here shows the proficiency rate for us in the state of North Carolina on the ELA, the reading assessments our kids take in elementary and middle school over about the last 2 decades. And there are a couple of really big inflection points here. You can see one in 2008 and another in 2013. Both of those years were years when new tests came out. And so our experience with new tests in reading and math, particularly in this case in reading, is that we tend to see huge drops in proficiency when a new test comes out. I mean, 20, 30, 40 percentage points sometimes, not just us, but the state as a whole. And if you look at the next one here, I've got the same data for math back to 2002, and you can very easily pick out the 2 years when the state changed its math tests, 2006, and most recently in 2013, where the proficiency rate here here in the district went from almost 83% down to 47%, literally overnight. So as we were get ready to get new results back, we were kind of anticipating one of these kinds of events, because history tells us this is kind of how it works. But as we found out, not really. It didn't actually kind of go down that way this time. This sort of chart here displays the achievement level structure on our tests. That kind of explains a little bit about what's different. On the bottom there, we've got sort of the different ranges that represent the achievement levels on the old grade 5 math test as an example. And you can see in the middle there, that green bit, level 3 was really small. There was only about, there were very few students scoring in that range because it was a really small range of scores. And part of what happened with the new test is that level 3, which is our cutoff for proficiency in North Carolina, got wider. And in some cases, it ate back into level 2 a little bit, and in some cases, it ate up forward into level 4 a little bit. So we're seeing fewer students in the 4 and 5 range on the new test, and in some cases, we're even seeing fewer students below 3 because that level 3 group kind of got wider through the standard setting process that the state did. So that also makes it kind of complicated to compare old and new. You'll also notice that whereas in previous years, we've always had level 1 and level 2 as the two categories that are below proficient, the state has now decided to just call all of that not proficient and just group it all into one chunk. So we really only have 4 achievement levels on these tests, whereas we used to have the 5. And so we've got not, and then 3, 4, and 5. And then they'll be doing the same thing with the reading test this year as well. So all that is to say, when tests change, it's kind of hard sometimes to look at data over time, but we're going to do our best to sort of walk you through that and line up as many of these things as we can in terms of what our district's results look like this year. So in terms of proficiency rates, one of the things we tend to do is to see how we stand relative to the state as a whole. Historically, Wake has been a higher performing district compared to state averages. And here across all the different tests on this particular chart, we seem to have left off biology for some reason, so I'll apologize for that. But you can see we run about 4 to 9 percentage points in terms of proficiency above the state across all of these tests, with one exception, and that's 5th grade science, where the state actually is besting us right now. That is the one place where there is an exception there. A couple of other context bits for this slide. If you look at the math grade 8, what we're looking at there is the publicly reported grade 8 numbers that the state gives us, which are not, it's a mashup of 2 different things. It's students who take math 1 in the 8th grade, plus students who take the regular 8th grade math test, which is all the students who aren't in math 1. So it's kind of the proficiency rate in math for our 8th graders, regardless of what class they're in. And the reason we're reporting that number there is because that's how the state reports it, and if we want to compare ourselves to them, we have to come up with a number that means the same thing. And so that's what is behind that number. And then one over that to the right, the Math 1 number there, that number is based on all students who take Math 1 regardless of what grade level they're in. We have students as low as grade 6 and as late as grade 12 who take Math 1 in any given year. And so there's a really wide spread there. And so when we calculate that number for our students and compare it to the state's number, we're running about 8 percentage points higher than that. And as some additional context, the only place you can find that number for the state is in the State Board of Education materials from their August meeting, where they approved the cut scores on that new test. It is not a number that they report under the federal ESSA accountability dynamic. There are a lot of little esoteric rules about how they report data, such that that's the only place we were able to locate that Math 1 number that literally covers all kids, all grades. Doesn't matter whether you're middle school or high school kid, to provide that apples to apples comparison. Getting a little bit deeper into reading, you can see here the reading tests have been the same since 2013, since the curriculum changed the last time. And looking across these grade levels, you can see it's a little bit of up, a little bit of down, not a whole lot of movement across the board. We were up a little bit in 7 and 8 this past year, and down a little bit in grade 4, up a little bit in grade 3, which, as we know, is kind of one of those key inflection points that people like to monitor around being a bellwether of future success for students in terms of literacy. So not great changes either way, and there are a couple percentage points either way, depending on the grade level you're looking at. Now, when we move to math, here we see a different picture. This is where we've got new tests. And as I said before, historically, we expect to see huge drops when we get a new test. And we didn't see that this year, which was definitely different. At the elementary level, the proficiency rates on that new test are right in line about with what the old one was. Down about 1% in grade 3, up a little bit in grade 4, and flat in grade 5. And if you look at that, the information I referenced before from the standard setting on the new tests, the state shows a very similar pattern. Performance at the elementary level on these new math tests is right about in line with previous years, give or take a percentage point. And then the other interesting piece to note is in the middle school level, performance actually is better on the new test than the old one. We saw 4 to 6 percentage point gains across these grade levels, and that again mirrors what the state as a whole was showing when they released their results. So essentially the passing standard got a little bit easier in middle school in some ways with the new test, which, as you know, is not the way it's tended to go in the past. I'll also point out that the little anomaly there on the Math 8 line there, where as of the last couple of years, only the students who are not enrolled in advanced math in middle school are taking that Math 8-1 test, and that's why we see that big drop there 2 years ago, is because our Math 1 students, or students who are even beyond Math 1, no longer have to sit for that test, and that's what caused that big disconnect there 2 years ago. Moving on to science. Science was up in both grades 5 and 8 this year, which is great. So continued improvements there, up to 82%, which is as high as we've seen it in recent memory in grade 8, which is excellent. Moving on to the end of course tests. Here we've got the 3 for which we have some history, which are Math 1, Biology, and English 2. Up a little bit in biology and basically level in English 2 this past year. With respect to Math 1, again, just to provide a little more context, this is based on all tested students, grades 6 through 12. This is not a number that the state typically reports, but because we have so many students taking Math 1 in middle school, we feel like to kind of get the comprehensive picture, we really need to include all students in that number. And you can see it's been bouncing around in the low to mid 60s for the last several years. And now this past year with the new test, it's down about 3 percentage points overall. That's grades 6 through 12. Again, looking at the state standard setting information that we got from that August state board meeting about the statewide picture, it was about a 2 percentage point drop at the state. So down just a touch there. Peeling that number apart a little bit more, middle school and high school separately for Math 1 are shown on this chart. So as you can see, the darker bar here is the old test from 2 years ago, and the orange bar is the new one. You can see middle school is still right there in about the mid-90s, although a 2 percentage point drop on the new test. So you can see when you move to the high school level, that's really where the drop is a little bit more pronounced. So if you think about the previous slide there where I showed that small drop on the new test, it's really affecting, it looks like, our high school students more so than our middle school students. And part of the reason for that is because Wake has been very aggressive over the years in accelerating kids into advanced math classes in middle school. And so the little red text box over there shows you the breakdown of how many of our Math 1 students are middle school versus high school every year. And you can see that, we're pushing about a 50-50 split at this point. 48% of our kids last year who took Math 1 did so before high school. Statewide, only about 27% of students take Math 1 in the middle school level. So what that means is the middle school students who are taking it are generally about our top half in terms of our math achievement students in terms of where they perform, because part of the criteria for being accelerated to get into that class is based on your math performance from prior years, as you might suspect. And so at the high school level, that group of kids has generally been performing closer to the margin, if you will, in terms of proficiency in the past. And anytime you see a shift in a cut score where a test becomes a little bit harder, it's going to affect kids on the bubble a lot more than it's going to affect kids who are sort of in the extremes. And our middle school kids tend to really outperform that cut score by a pretty wide margin. So when you just move it a little bit, it doesn't really change the picture for a lot of them. Sort of the financial analogy I always think of is when the price of a gallon of gas goes up to like $5 a gallon. The average person, that's a hit, right? But Warren Buffett's probably not cutting his commute, right? Because it's not that much of a difference to him because he's got a lot more money to play with than the average person does. So that's kind of the phenomenon we tend to see when we get this big spread of when kids are taking some of these classes, and that's why it's a little bit more pronounced at the high school level, I think, for us. Math 3, the only year we've had the test is this past year, and you can see here 54% of kids scored proficient or above here in Wake compared to about 47% statewide. So hands down, this is probably the most difficult test on the docket that the state has. I think it's the only one right now where the passing rate is actually below 50% for the entire state, so the majority of kids around the state did not score proficient on this. And it's something that's taken by virtually every high school student because most kids have to progress through Math 3 in order to meet graduation requirements. So it was the first year of it, but it was obviously a very tough one for a lot of folks. So growth is the other side of the coin that we always like to look at with our test results, and in a lot of ways for schools, this is really the most important information for them because it's the one that really shows them how did we do with the crop of students that we taught last year. You know, in an elementary school, every year you lose all your fifth graders, you get a whole new crop of kindergartners, and you know, you've got this constant churn in your population, and so sometimes proficiency rates can move around, not just because the tests change, but sometimes because the populations of kids moving through are a little bit different. But the way that the state calculates growth, it kind of smooths all that out and provides a nice apples-to-apples comparison that provides them some good trend information that smooths out some of those bumps. As you may know, in our state, the categories that the state has for growth are does not meet, meets, or exceeds, and so what they generally report is the percentage of schools that fall into each of those three buckets. While we don't have the specific subject and grade level information on that yet, we should have that to be able to get to our schools hopefully in the next couple of weeks. So right now, all that's been released is the overall school growth results, and those are here on this next chart. As of 2019, we had about 64 to 65% of our students meeting or exceeding the state's growth expectations. That's the most we've had since 2016. It's been ticking downward the last couple of years, and it turned back north for us here in 2019. So we were excited to see that. More of our schools than in the past meeting those growth standards. With respect to graduation rate, that's sort of the linchpin of our strategic plan, our Vision 2020 strategic plan, and so it's probably the data point that we really look at the most when it comes to releasing our results at the end of the year. We had some pretty good news on this front here this year. We increased our four-year graduation rate for the 7th year in a row, 89.8%, so just shy of the 90 mark. Also backing up a little bit to the previous bar here in this chart, we also report a 5-year on-time graduation rate because, as you all know, sometimes kids need that extra year to get a class in. We also have some students for whom it's part of the plan for them to take more than 4 years to graduate from high school, particularly some students with disabilities. And if you back up to the 2018 year there and add those two numbers together, that number, the 5-year graduation rate, is over 90% for the first time as well. So, you know, another record high, the 7th year in a row, we've had an increase on that. So we're very excited that that continues to go in the right direction. On this next chart here, we take that 89.8 from last year and we break it down across a lot of the major subgroups that we normally like to report out on and show about 3 years worth of data here on that. You can see Hispanic, Latino students have probably made the most gains over that period of time compared to any other subgroup, almost 4% over the last couple of years. But across all the different subgroups this past year, every group you see here except for the multiracial category labeled 2 or more races here was the only one that had a little bit of a dip last year. So that those gains were pretty well distributed across all of our different subpopulations of students. Also, if you're looking at the ELL group there and wondering why there's that big bump a couple of years ago, the state changed how they counted English language learners in that subgroup such that the rule for who got counted as an ELL student changed a couple of years ago, and that's part of why we saw that big bump there. But they also went up last year, year over year as well.
So, Brad, on this chart, the EDS means?
Economically disadvantaged. Thank you for
it's an abbreviation lots of folks probably aren't used to seeing.
That's a good point. EDS is economically disadvantaged, ELL is English language learners, and SWD is students with disabilities. Thank you for pointing that out. We use these things all the time. We forget that sometimes people aren't always using them.
On this one, do you have a state average for these?
The state average is on the next slide. It's 86.5. So that is on the next slide, but yeah, 86.5. So we're still running a few percentage points above the state average. Not for subgroups, but that's the overall.
Subgroups.
Yeah, the subgroup data, it's on DPI's website, and it's just been handed to me. That only happens on television. That's weird. I love that. Yeah, if there's a group you're interested in, African-American students, 83.6. I'll go kind of left to right here. Male is 83.5. Female, 89.7, Native American, 81.2, Asian, 94.5, African American, 83.6, Hispanic, 81.1, so they've got us there a little bit, 2 or more, 83.9, white, 89.6, EDS, 81.8, ELL 71.4, students with disabilities 69.8. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, looking at individual schools, some of this is a little hard to read, but I'll just sort of orient you to a couple things here. The yellow line is the state average, 86.5. That's the overall four-year on-time graduation rate. The green bar there is our district average, and then each of the other bars are all of our schools arrayed from lowest to highest, all the way from Longview all the way up to Wake Young Women's Leadership Academy up there at the top. And so just a couple of points to hit here. We have 19 high schools now that are above 90% with their graduation rate, and we have 24 of our high schools that are beating the state average. So, as those gains are marching up and up and up, we're sending more and more schools up toward close to 100%. We had 3 specifically last year and 1 that just barely missed it. ACT is another piece of the data that we like to look at every year because it's one of our indicators of our students' college readiness. And here you can see over the last 5-6 years the percentage of students here in Wake who have hit the college ready benchmark in all 4 of the subject areas on the ACT test. English, reading, math, and science are the 4, and they've done research to say that if you score at or above a certain level, you're basically at the point where you ought to be able to do freshman level coursework in that area. We're up for the second year in a row, up to 27% of our juniors who are already hitting all 4 of those benchmarks in the spring of their junior year, compared to 16% at the state. So that's continuing to trend the right way as well. Advanced placement is another piece of the puzzle for us that we like to examine, and here we've got a rather long 20-plus year look at not only the number of AP assessments or AP tests that our students have taken, but maybe more importantly, the red line, which is the number of individual students who've participated in the AP program by taking one of those assessments. And you can see those numbers have been heading up. They kind of spiked quite a bit there around 2013, 2014. The reason for that, in addition to us, of course, encouraging it, was the state received a grant right around that time point from the federal government to waive the exam fees. So the 80-some-odd dollars that kids would normally have had to have paid to take those exams, they became free. And so that really kind of opened it up for, I think, a lot more students, up to about 13,000 plus students who took at least one AP exam last year somewhere in one of our high schools. There's a little bit of a downturn there, you'll notice, in the number of exams. We're not really sure last year what that's all about. It kind of dipped by a few hundred. But best theory we have so far, without being able to peel back into it, is with all the early college and dual enrollment stuff, I think AP is no longer the only way for kids to sort of dip their toe in the college experience and kind of see what college level instruction is like. With all of our early college high schools and arrangements we have with Wake Tech, I suspect there's a lot more kids taking advantage of that instead, and that may be siphoning off some of the students who might have otherwise enrolled in AP before we got really heavy into those programs, but that's just me speculating. I don't really have any data on that. As far as scores 3 or higher, one of the things that happened when we saw that big spike in test taking in the mid-2010s was that the percentage of kids who scored at or above a level 3, which is kind of what AP calls passing, kind of took a dip on us there. You can see that in 14-15, while that previous chart was going up, this one went down a little bit, but the last couple of years it's turned back north for us again. So we're still maintaining kind of a wider berth of kids participating in AP, and the scores are starting to tick back up closer to where they used to be, which is also encouraging because we want there to be equity in the program. We want lots of kids to access it, but we also want them to be successful while they're in there, so that's nice. And then the last piece I'm going to share with you all today is actually not part of the state's data release. I'm going to share some results from our district's performance tasks that we do. This is something that got started with the most current strategic plan, which, as you know, is very heavily focused on the 4 C's: communication, critical thinking, collaboration, and creativity. And one of the concerns voiced by leadership at the time was, if we value these things, we ought to have some way of knowing whether or not students are developing them. How do we know that they're happening? How do we measure them? And so we worked with an outside group to develop performance tasks for students in grades 4 and grade 7. That they take in the spring. And basically what this is a structured task where kids are presented with some source material, maybe a scientific article or a letter to the newspaper editor or some kind of information. And they're given a scenario where they're asked to craft an essay-style response to address an issue, and take a position, argue for it, use evidence from the sources to cite it. And then those essays are scored based on 3 dimensions. One is writing mechanics, which is, grammar, punctuation, sentence structure, those kinds of things. Their ability to use evidence to back up their positions, and then also critical thinking. And here we've got the results from the last 2 years for those 2 grade levels. And as you look across the 4th grade row there, you can see last year we saw a slight upward tick in mechanics and critical thinking and a little bit of a dip on the evidence portion of the rubric. And in grade 7, we saw increases on all 3 there. The range is kind of tight, so these numbers don't fluctuate a whole lot because they're either 1 to 3 or 1 to 4. But certainly encouraging that we're seeing that kind of movement, because if we can get this kind of movement along with the movement that we're seeing on the standards-based stuff, we've kind of got the whole enchilada there. We've got the skills that we know kids need, which are agnostic to subject and grade level, but then we've also got some evidence that they're increasingly mastering standards. So it was really encouraging to see through the first couple of years, we're already seeing some small positive movement there.
I've got a quick question
Sure.
about that one. You said that you used an outside group for
Yes.
that. What was the group?
We use a company out of Durham called Measurement Incorporated. They're a testing company, and they helped us develop the tasks, and then they also are our contractor for scoring, where they hire people to score the essays for us, because it's a very time-intensive, person-intensive process. You're welcome.
I'm sorry, so it was both developed and then scored by this outside group?
Well, they're developed by our folks, actually. The tasks are developed by our folks. They're anchored in either science or social studies standards that are appropriate for that particular grade level, but they provide us with sort of some technical advice around, what kind of instructions do you give teachers, and, is this going to take too long? Is it going to take too less of a time? Is the readability right? But our content folks are the ones who develop all the content and kind of approve everything. So, but they work with us more on the technical side, if that makes sense. Okay. So to see any of this information below the district level, one of the other things that we do this time of year is we publish what are called our school progress reports. These also started a couple of years ago. I think this is about our 4th year of doing these. And what it does is it takes a lot of the information that I've been sharing with you all along with some other data that I'll highlight here in a minute, and puts it all out there by school in a simple 2-page PDF. That can be printed out or downloaded very easily from our district's website. The front page will look like this, and it'll have some proficiency and growth information that'll compare every school to the district and to the state as a whole. It'll also have basic vision and mission for the school, and some basic numbers around number of students and number of teachers. And then on the back side, we continue with some additional data points that compare to the district and the state, but it's not just about sort of test scores and student performance. We get into teacher characteristics and how experienced the staff is at the school. We have some survey data in here that speak to teachers' perceptions around the school climate, according to how they perceive it, and also teacher perceptions around school leadership, both of which are drawn from the teacher working conditions survey. So kind of a broader swath of data that include not only student outcomes, but also some of the inputs that we feel like are important in moving the needle on those student outcomes, and make those available for every school so that every school community can kind of see where they stack up on all these different things, and relative to the district and relative to the state. So to wrap up, we remain well above state averages on almost every metric that the state produces every year, with a couple of exceptions. This past year, we saw some mixed proficiency gains in ELA, but we were up across the board in science, which was great to see. And then, of course, the math proficiency gains, I spent a little bit more time on that just because that's a little bit more complicated with those new tests. And it's, a little bit of a good up in middle school, flat in elementary school, and then kind of a hard-to-interpret picture at the high school level because of all the nuance there. And the same thing is going to happen with our reading tests this coming year. We're going to have new tests, and scores will be delayed, and we'll have this discontinuity in our trends again that we'll have to try and sort of power through. ACTs are up slightly, which is great to see. That's one of our big metrics for whether our kids are prepared for that next level of higher education. Our performance task results are showing that some of those 4C skills are bubbling up for our 4th and 7th graders, and also more of our schools met growth expectations this year than had since 2016. So we're excited about that. And again, 7th year in a row, we've had an increase in our graduation rates, so we're at the highest ever, and many of our subgroups are at the highest levels that they've ever been. And then just as an additional piece, the school-by-school reports I recently referenced, I included the URL there in case anybody wants to go check some of those out. Those are posted on our website for all of our elementary, middle, and high schools. And with that, I'm finished. Thank you.
Any questions? Mr. Haggerty.
And I know you said we'd take a deeper dive into this at a student achievement meeting, so I don't know how much discussion we want to have on this, but I have a couple questions, but the big one I have is if you can give me a little bit more explanation. I understand that when you have a new test, it makes it difficult to have apple-and-apple comparisons of old data to new data with a different test. But why is it that the new tests lead to drop in scores? Is it that there's a new scale for judging performance? Is it that the new test has more rigor? Is it that the items on the new test aren't taught or prepped for? What is it that leads just that it's a new or a different test? Is there some causal relation to why the scores are different?
Yeah, there's a number of reasons why they can go down, and I'll sort of start with the kind of the main ones and then go into some of the more ones that are maybe a little less common. The number one reason is shifts in standards. Generally, when our standards have changed over the last 20 years, it's been to put more rigor in where it was not before. So, for example, and I'm sure someone who knows math better than I can speak to this, but there are topics in mathematics that are now taught and assessed at earlier grade levels than they were in previous years. So anytime you take a more difficult concept and you push it back down, you're essentially compacting what kids need to learn, particularly in a subject area like math where things are kind of linear and skills build on each other. So sometimes it's moving those more difficult standards down in the curriculum so kids are exposed to and held accountable for them earlier. At other times, it can be how the state decides to set the cut scores. The process that they go through to do that by bringing teachers in and having them go through like a 2 or 3 day process is very labor intensive and very data intensive, but it's as much art as it is science. Teachers are making judgments about, they're looking at test items and they're saying, would a kid who's mastered your class get that question right or wrong? And well, I don't know, they kind of might, some of them could, there's a lot of judgment involved there. And so sometimes the instructions that they give and the standards that they ask those panels to hold to can also make the test harder, even if the curriculum standards haven't changed. So sometimes it's the standard setting process, and sometimes it's the curriculum standards themselves, and sometimes it can even be both. The standards can get harder. Like we saw in 2013 when we adopted Common Core here in North Carolina, everybody knew those standards were going to be harder. And the tests became harder and everything just went kind of off the cliff on us a little bit. So usually it's one of those two things. So it can be the standards or it can be simply the processes the state uses to put the cut scores in place.
The reality from the classroom is there's also a comfort level. Once a second year of a test, you kind of know what to expect. That happens. So that happens all the time with just about any test.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, because when those standards change, not only do they get harder, but now teachers have to adjust to teaching things they haven't taught before. So when a teacher's got to make that kind of an adjustment and teach differently than they've taught before, sometimes that first year is a little bit difficult. But then once you get into a rhythm with it, that's why after some of those big drops there on those charts I showed earlier on, you see they sort of start to tick upward over time. So.
Ms. Kushner.
Sorry. So when we take this deeper dive and looking at ELA, I'm interested in the switch to Letterland, the very phonics-based instruction. I'd be interested in seeing how that may have affected some of our proficiency. Just discuss, because phonics comes up in the community, and just to discuss that more at student achievement would be helpful.
It does. It's a very spirited discussion on that topic sometimes. So I think that's certainly something we can bring some context on, because we do have a history. We've been doing Letterland for a little while, and we have collected some data around it and know a little bit about how it's been going in terms of implementation and things. So yeah, I think we can definitely do that in November.
And this may happen in student achievement too, but we talked a lot about new test. I have a kid who took a new test, and not just the teacher and environment, but the students also know it's a new test and a new standard, so that anxiety exists for them, although it already exists. So I'm curious, is there a trend on how long it takes to level set for a new test in terms of our scores? Because even when we look at it, you did a great job of mentioning this is when this test or standard changed, and then notice the dip. And then, so I'm just curious, and you don't have to have an answer because I can look and see it, but without numbers, I'm guessing.
Yeah, I mean, the bigger the drop, the longer the recovery, probably, like all other things being equal. But, we provide a lot of support from the district. Teachers do a lot of good work themselves. These things don't kind of come out of nowhere, right? Mm-hmm. Usually curriculum refinements at the state level are, queued up a few years in advance, and it depends on how the runway gets built, and it depends on how significant the shift is. If it's really just basically tweaking some language and changing some words and some standards from, demonstrate to apply, that's easy to adjust to. But when you're taking ratios and proportions and moving it from one grade level to another grade level and asking a teacher who's never taught that before to go ahead and do that, that's obviously probably going to provide a little bit more of a bumpier ride in terms of getting back to where you would expect kids to be. So it just varies.
Well, isn't it fair to say that it makes sense to always normalize with respect to the state? I mean, you're looking at a bigger population. If we did something either really good or terrible, if we would see a deviation from the state's performance. But if we're tracking the same general trend, it's more likely a test issue than it is any school-specific issue.
Well, and that's part of why we put that look in there, right? Because we're always looking to see, are we getting better ourselves, regardless of how the state's doing? But having some kind of external benchmark for, is 67% good, bad, or in between? You have to have something to anchor that in, and usually, because tests are different in different states, we don't have a national number, so the North Carolina number is our next best anchor point.
Strider?
And this is just a little bit of clarification. I'm going back and I'm looking at slides 8 and slides 10 and slides 12.
Mm-hmm.
And I took notes based on what you said, but I'm not sure if I took it down right, if I understand it. I have you explained the Math 8 grades on page 10.
Yes.
Were included Math 1 plus grade 8.
Yes.
So 8th grade students who might have taken Math 1 are included in those grade 8 numbers, there on page 10,
on
right?
Number 10, yes.
On number
yes,
10. And so then the Math 1 numbers on page 10, does that also include the grades 6 through 8 that took Math 1?
Yes, 6 through
Okay.
12, it's everybody who took Math 1. So essentially that grade 8 bar and that Math 1 bar, they're not mutually exclusive. You've got
You
some
have
of the
some
same
in one
kids.
set and then some in the other set.
Yeah.
Is that how DPI is reporting?
The grade 8 number is how they report it, where they take the
Mm-hmm.
grade 8 plus the 8th grade Math 1 kids and put them all in the same pot. The Math 1 number there on that chart, the only place we report that number all the time to our schools because we just want to know how are we doing on Math 1, and we don't care grade 6, grade 8, grade 12, grade 9. But that number for the state doesn't get reported in like the databases on their website, but it was reported in the standard setting information that went to the board when they approved the cut scores. And so we had to kind of pull it out of there because when they turn around and put it on their website, they're trying to adhere to their federal ESSA reporting requirements, and those are really funky and esoteric and have all kinds of inclusion-exclusion rules that sometimes aren't super transparent.
Okay, so then on slide 12, we had students in Math 1, the report here. Is that right? Page 12, I might be looking at the wrong one. Which one is Math 1?
Thinking 14.
Maybe 14, I apologize. Students in Math 1 are no longer take the grade 8 Math EOG. So at some point, when we're talking about the EOG grades.
Oh, yeah, on 12. Yeah, I was
Yeah.
trying to explain that drop from 17 to 18 in Math 8, where it went from like the 50s to 20. That's because prior to that year where it dropped to 20, if I was an 8th grade Math 1 kid, I had to sit for the 8th grade EOG anyway, even though I wasn't really learning that content. But because
Right.
those kids are so advanced, they did really well on the test. Well, now they don't sit for it anymore, so now you're taking thousands of proficient scores out of the pot between that year and the next year.
So I was just wondering how it seems like we're including that population in both sets on one slide, but maybe taking them out on this slide?
On this one, the only reason we take them out is because we're not comparing to the
Actually
state.
taking the test? Okay.
Yeah, because the state doesn't report a pure grade 8 math number that is independent of Math 1. And so since we don't have a state comparison there, that
explains the
that's
difference.
just our grade 8, yeah.
Okay.
So kind of just trying to do it all possible combinations and permutations.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Ms. Cash?
When you dive into some of these schools, as I've been doing, what happens if some of their school environments have NAs beside them?
Are you talking on the school progress reports
Yeah.
on those last couple slides? There's some places where the state doesn't report a comparable number, so we'll have like a Wake County number and a district number, but then the state number will be NA because they don't have a corresponding number. Like I think we report a suspension rate number on there for which the state doesn't really publicly report anything that we can anchor to.
So what about like if you're looking at a school and under our school, there's an NA?
Can you give me a specific example?
Fox Road.
Fox Road has an NA for which one?
For all the school environment, all school climate.
I will have to look at that. That should not be the case.
Okay.
Might have been something in the report development process where something got wiped out, but no, that should.
That's not the one. I'm not looking at the right school here.
Unless you're looking at you're looking at the first column.
Oh, maybe I'm looking at the wrong thing.
Oh, that's probably just a glitch. We'll get that fixed. I'm surprised Mr. Lewis hasn't called us yet. He's usually very, very on top of seeing those sorts of things. But yeah, it's probably just a glitch. We'll get it fixed.
Don't tell him I asked.
I will not. I will not. Shouldn't have anything to do with it. There may have been. We did have a few schools that didn't participate in the teacher survey at such a level. If at least a third of the teachers don't respond, we don't tend to show data. And every year we have a few schools that don't complete the survey. So it's either that or it's a glitch in the machine that produces the reports. But I'll look into it either way. Oh, thank you for letting me know. I appreciate it. You're the first person who's pointed it out, and they've been out there for 2 weeks, so that's great.
Any other comments or questions? No, it is only for the board table. Okay. Thank you.
Chair
I'll now
Martin.
entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Chair Martin, I make a motion to approve the consent items as listed.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the consent items. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. The consent items have passed. We have 3 items before us on the action agenda. The first item on the action agenda is approval of the 2019-2020 AIG plan. Mr. Drew Cook.
Good evening, Chair Martin, Superintendent Moore, Vice Chair Sutton, and members of the board. This evening, we bring to you for approval the proposed 2019-2022 academically and intellectually gifted plan, which is aligned to the AIG program standards outlined by the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction. North Carolina state statute requires LEAs to develop a 3-year AIG plan with specific components to be included. The legislation requires identification and services for K-12 gifted education students. The AIG plan must be approved by local boards and submitted to the State Board of Education and the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction. The plan can be periodically reviewed and updated as needed. The proposed Wake County Public School System AIG plan is aligned with our district's Vision 2020 strategic plan and our core beliefs, with a specific focus on challenging every student every day, eliminating the predictability of achievement, and supporting a culture of continuous improvement and innovation. After a collaborative, multi-phase development process, the AIG plan was reviewed by the superintendent's leadership team on 2 separate occasions, then presented to the board for discussion and feedback at the September 3rd, 2019 work session. The version that you have before you incorporates feedback received from the board in that session. At this time, we submit the 2019-22 AIG plan for your approval.
Madam
Do I hear
Chair,
a motion?
I would move to approve the plan as staff is presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Mr. Chair, just briefly, I had asked some questions about the plan and work session, and I've spoken with Mr. Cook and reviewed everything, and I think they've addressed the concerns that I raised.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the AIG plan, and you said it's 1920 to 22.
22, yes, sir.
Signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. The plan is approved.
Thank you.
We now have 2 policies before us for first reading. The first policy is on the operation of unmanned aircraft systems, drones. Here for the first reading, Ms. Parker.
Thank you, Chair Martin, Superintendent Moore, ladies and gentlemen. I'm pleased today to bring you policy number 3222/5042/6422, the operation of unmanned aircraft systems and drones. It's a new policy and has been reviewed at the superintendent's leadership team meetings on January 28th, April 22nd, and August 25th of this year. It's also been reviewed by our policy committee at their meetings on April 25th and August 27th of this year, and it was presented for discussion earlier today. There are 4 changes that came out of our earlier meeting today that I would note for consideration and your approval. The first is in the first sentence of the preamble. There has been a recommendation that the word risks be substituted with the word responsibilities. so that sentence would read, "The Wake County Board of Education recognizes the benefits and responsibilities of operating unmanned aircraft systems, drones, for educational and commercial purposes." The second change is to the title of paragraph B, to change the title from risks to applicable laws and regulations. In the first two sentences of paragraph B, a recommendation has also been made to strike those two sentences in their entirety. And then the final change is in paragraph F, inappropriate use. There is a paragraph beneath subparagraph 4 of that section, and the intention is to adjust the first two sentences so that it reads as one. That's accomplished by striking the first 6 words of the first sentence, and then striking the period at the end of that sentence and the first word of the following sentence. As a result, that paragraph should read, "Inappropriate use of drone technology as defined by this policy may be subject to disciplinary action up to and including suspension for students, termination for school system employees, or termination of contracts or revocation of drone use privileges on or over board property, and or any legal recourse available to the school system for vendors and others." Those were the only changes, and with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Chair Martin, on behalf of the Policy Committee, I move approval of operation of unmanned aircraft systems drones, Policy 3222, on first reading.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
And that would be with those recommended changes from work session.
With the recommended changes. Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Passed on its first reading.
And, Mr. Chair, if we can, I just want to commend staff on all the work on this policy, because I know they really were starting from ground zero and spent hours and hours coming back addressing our concerns. And this is one that I think a lot of hard work went into, and I hope it'll be a model for others.
I completely concur. Thank you to all of staff. And this will be a model for others. It's probably is the first drone policy for K-12 systems in the state. So thank you for the work. Yeah, I think we got a good start.
Thank you.
The second policy before us tonight is Policy 5070/7350 on public records retention. And I believe Mr. Simmons will be presenting.
Good evening, board members, superintendent. Policy 5070/7350 was reviewed at the May 20th Superintendent's Leadership Team meeting, and also reviewed at the August 27th Policy Committee meeting, as well as presented for discussion this afternoon at the board work session. The only change to this policy that is not included in the draft that you have is on page 2 at the end of at the bottom of section A, the third paragraph, which begins, "If a record contains confidential information," and it is to be changed to read, "If a public record contains confidential information." The remainder of the language is as discussed at the work session.
Chair Martin, on behalf of the Policy Committee, I move approval of Public Records Retention, Release, and Disposition, Policy Code 5070 on first reading with the stated amendment.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
I did want to, again, this is a new policy, so just like the drone policy, we are capturing new policy for the Wake County schools, so I appreciate that we've taken the time on both of these to get the iteration quite right, so thank you. Back down to the very last moment, we're still adding words and getting it tweaked. Be prepared for second reading, though, sir. I think we might think of some more.
Fair enough.
Well, I think it's also appropriate to highlight the staff's comments. I was looking for the text where it is the intent that we provide the public records free of charge. There we are, in C. The board's intent is to make public records accessible free of charge, except in the limited consequences set forth in this provision. And I think that's a culture that we all endorse and are glad to see it in the policy. Okay. All right. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. The policy is passed on its first reading. We have already had the motion to go into closed session read, but I will entertain a motion to go back into closed session for the reasons previously.
If I could interject, could we do the HR recommendations?
I've got it written down here and I missed it. Do I hear a motion to approve the HR recommendations that we covered in closed session?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the HR recommendations. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. The HR recommendations are approved. Now I will entertain a motion to return to closed session for the reasons previously stated.
I move that we return to closed session for the reasons previously stated.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. We'll return to closed session. Thank you.